I am still grinding for the Tangled Gnarlwood in February 2025. This is Road to Gold. Welcome to War Games on Toast, all of you lovely people. It's me. It's Toast. How are you doing today? Last week I started my Road to Gold series where I take a warband and then try and get gold at the next big event for Warcry near me, and that just so happens to be the Tangled Gnarlwood in Warhammer World. The warband I chose to take was the decidedly middling Untamed Beasts, and in my repping so far I've done pretty well, going 4-0 if I recall correctly. Since then I've had 3 more games with the Untamed Beasts, and I thought it was about time to come back and give you an update on what I've been running and what I've learned in that process. But before I get into all of that, it's time for a little bit of shilling.
I am shocked. Shocked. Well, not that shocked.
Please consider leaving a like, a comment and subscribing, as that helps me fight against that dastardly YouTube algorithmic demon. And if you want to help in a more tangible way, then please consider signing up to my Patreon or my YouTube members, or using my Element Games affiliate link down below when buying some new Warcry gubbins. A huge shout out to my patrons and members who you can find on screen now. Badoosh. But with all of that out of the way, it's time to get on with the show.
And now for something completely different.
And we are back, and before I get started with the battle reports, all that good stuff, I do need to correct the date. In the first video I mentioned that was on the 17th of February, but it's actually on the 7th of February, I think. I could be still wrong there. I'm pretty sure it's the 7th of February, so there's that. Let me know in the comments down below if you managed to secure your ticket, because they sold out in like 5 minutes. So this is probably the fastest selling Warcry event on the planet, which is pretty darn cool and a really positive sign that Warcry is doing well, and that is my phone dinging twice. If you want to know more about the event, feel free to check out my first video, Badoosh, where I go over the format that Warhammer World tends to enforce. But with all of that out of the way, let's get on with the first list I ran, Badoosh. This was a Fomeroid, Crusher and Vexmore list, which might seem a little bit cheesy, but these two things do work very well within the Untamed Beast, because the Untamed Beasts have a very powerful pull piece in the first fang, and having access to cheap and fast chaff and a pretty darn solid leader, the Untamed Beasts do actually pretty well with their 8-man warband packing 2 serious threats and some support with that pull. I ran this list into pure Corvus Cabal, running double Shrike Talon, which, if you know me, I'm a massive fan of the double Shrike Talon. It is incredibly brutal, and they were incredibly brutal in this game too. The game started pretty well in my favour. We were playing Brutal Encounter, Badoosh on screen now, which is one of the Warhammer World missions, and it was pretty darn brutal. Early on, I got a pretty good lead as my Fomeroid Crusher just went in and just started laying down the smackdown. Vexmore and my first fang were on the flanks and pressuring his deployments, and it went pretty well, but then he did not take the bait. You see, I sent in my Fomeroid Crusher right to the middle of the map, purely to goad one of his Shrike Talons who were already elevated to jump in and try and kill my Fomeroid Crusher, which on average would fail because the Fomeroid Crusher is a little bit too tough for a Shrike Talon to reliably kill in one round of combat. Then my Crusher would go first turn 2 and kill his Shrike Talon, taking out one of his biggest threats pretty darn effortlessly. However, my opponent outfoxed me and did not take the bait, and instead leaped his Shrike Talon over the Fomeroid Crusher and dove right into my backline and started attacking my chaff. Thankfully, they were a little bit too far away to start conceding points on the first turn, but my Fomeroid Crusher was out of position and my backline was completely undefended, and all of his guys just started to run away, so I couldn't catch him. So despite that early lead, turn 2 did not go in my favour because my reinforcements came on. A Shrike Talon just dove by my heart ear and killed him outright, which was terrible news because in Brutal Encounter, if your leader dies, he concedes points every single turn. So with that in mind, my opponent had scored a minimum of 4 points without doing anything else for the rest of the game, which is a pretty darn big swing. To add insult to injury, the Shrike Talon in my backline did manage to kill one of my planesrunners. However, thanks to the power of Brute Resilience, I had managed to save one of them who was still at full health because it took 2 whole attack actions to kill the first planesrunner. Seeing as that was going to be a continual source of points, I decided to now flip my Vexmore and run him all the way back to my deployment zone to try and catch that Shrike Talon on turn 3, and with movement 9 he got pretty darn far, but not quite close enough to do anything really this turn. The stars started to align a little bit when the first fang lobbed his harpoon and then he yanked the Shrike Talon towards him, and then he got thoroughly beaten to death by the first Fang's Strength 5. So after an action-packed turn 2, I'd managed to hold onto the lead only slightly, so despite the action-packed turn 2, turn 3 wasn't all that eventful. A lot of our chaff just kind of ran away and ran around the board to sort of hold quarters. My Plains Runner with the Shrike Talon died, naturally. He did not survive very long, so he died. But that did take both of his actions to do, so the Shrike Talon could not move now, which allowed Vexmo to run in and tie him up for turn 4. Thanks to a cheeky harpoon from that first Fang, I also managed to tie out the points this round by killing one of his Cabalists. So at the top of turn 4, it looked like it was going to be a tie. However, things actually went my way as Vexmo killed the Shrike Talon, the first Fang impaled somebody else, and Vexmo survived an ungodly amount of attacks from spears and raven darts. So once all was said and done, I won by a single point, so it was incredibly close, and it was testament again to those Shrike Talons. They are absolutely deadly if you're out of position, and I made a fair few mistakes this game that really allowed those Shrike Talons to sing. Firstly, that From Red Crusher didn't do enough to warrant his inclusion in this list, even though he is incredibly strong, and that's because the Shrike Talon just killed my chaff. What I should have done was move the chaff away so they weren't in range to get tied up by that Shrike Talon, and that would have made loads of sense. It didn't end up that way. And also my deployment on turn 2 with the Heart Eater getting caught by a second Shrike Talon also shouldn't have happened, because he should have been behind a wall of chaff that he deployed with, but I got a bit cocky and then conceded 4 whole points over the course of the game, which was pretty darn nasty. And finally, despite the list being fairly nimble with movement 5 across the board, bar Vexmo, I really struggled to catch people when they were running away, because movement 5 into movement 5 and no access to charge just means my guys are a little bit slow, and it is very easy to outmaneuver them if you are just as fast. This does lead into the first Fang, who is an absolute beast. The first Fang for 130 points is outstanding to begin with. That range attack is fantastic. The pull is fantastic. His melee profile is absolutely fine. He's got 15 wounds, toughness 4. He's just a really solid piece on the battlefield, and he does well in every game, but he did especially well this game by killing 3 whole models, one of which being a Shrike Talon, and because he didn't have to actually go out and engage in close combat, he could throw his harpoon and pull people to him and then stab them to death with his range 2 spear. It was pretty darn fun, especially when you get that bonus attack action on that harpoon snag. So he's just super reliable at just doing his damage. He's a very fun piece, and he did work this game. And this followed through into the next game where I played against Skaven. And this is a pretty darn tuned Skaven list, although it could have been a lot meaner had he decided to bring in some more Rat Ogres. But he did bring in a bunch of Packmasters and 2 Rat Ogres and a whole bunch of Storm Vermin. And I decided to run a decidedly worse list than before. I dropped the From Red Crusher for Sarkar Blackwing and a Beast Speaker. And that was not a good trade. Sarkar Blackwing in this matchup is just not very good. She is way too squishy when there are strength 5 or 6 warp fire throwers on the board. And also nearly every single model on his board was toughness 5. So her strength for Once Blessed Wizard Bolt really wasn't doing anything. So this game was really bad. One, the list wasn't good. I still had Vexmo, but right from the get-go, I was really on the back foot. It really was just a case that Vexmo go up and start pounding things, but then Vexmo died early because, you know, Rat Ogres are incredibly strong. And Vexmo got completely bodied by a Rat Ogre who just ran in, punched him, then used his magical powers to attack again, then got whipped to attack again, and then that was Vexmo just dead. So Vexmo really didn't pull much weight this game, which wasn't great. I misplayed him. Admittedly, he shouldn't have ran so close to a Rat Ogre, but I did manage to claw this back. So Vexmo being a hero does mean that he was scoring my opponent a whole bunch of points over the course of the game. Thankfully, it was only 4, but it did put me on the back foot, especially when they're Skaven. Skaven being movement 6 are incredibly hard to catch, but he has Rat Ogres and he wants to use them, and I managed to get a little bit of advantage by using the first Fang. Again, the first Fang is just such a powerful piece. He really won this game. He was throwing harpoons. He one-shot Storm Vermin multiple times. He yanked in Packmasters. He did all kinds of nasty things. And really, I only stayed in the game because of that Packmaster, and to a smaller degree, Sarkar Blackwing, because Sarkar Blackwing managed to bait his Warpfire Thrower to chase her the whole game, and she didn't take much damage. That Warpfire Thrower, thanks to some pretty low dice, admittedly, failed to kill anything. And it was really because he was chasing Sarkar, who's movement 5 and fly, and once he would always get in the range, when he was firing, I was getting cover, and with a low volume of shots, he was just rolling badly, which is unfortunate. and Sarikar just tanked everything and survived. So while she didn't do any damage in this game, she did distract a very expensive piece for the whole game, which kept my chaff alive. They was running and hiding in quarters, trying to do quarter things. And yeah, it was a really rough game. In the end, it was a tie. It was a very hard fought for tie, and it was all down to that first Fang. The first Fang, once again, just paid dividends for 130 points. This guy scored like 300 points worth of kills, and he secured every single one of my points I scored that game, bar the one kill Vexmore got on a Storm Vermin or something. So the first Fang was absolutely outstanding. He got a double kill in one turn as well. So the dude was just insane. And without the first Fang, this was an absolute, just an effortless win by my opponent. So I'm glad I got that tie. And things I learned, once again, Vexmore is tough. He's not unkillable. You have to still consider threats, and rat ogres are a much more serious threat than Vexmore. If you get Vexmore out of position and a rat ogre is nearby, he will run in and he will beat you to death, and there is nothing you can do about that. So that's definitely something worth thinking about. And also, Sarikar Blackwing just isn't worth her points. I ran her in a Gnarl Spirit pack list on episode 1, and it worked very well, but Sarikar Blackwing by herself just doesn't really do enough. So she's definitely going to be cut from any future lists because I am not a huge fan of that. So that was game 2. Going into game 3, I was against a 1-box Jade Obelisk, and I decided to whip out the 1-box Untamed Beast because I generally like 1-box Untamed Beasts. And Jade Obelisk are a pretty strong 1-box because they have their defacers and their desecrators who are incredibly strong. So it'll be a good matchup against my faster and much squishier Untamed Beast. Going in, it was more durable but slower, but also killier Jade Obelisk. So unfortunately for my opponent, this game was actually an absolute stomp, and again, it really boiled down to the first Fang plays. This guy was throwing harpoons and just killing things left, right, and center. A common play was to throw a harpoon, stab them through the chest, yank them in, and then just stab them twice in melee for 8 attacks in total. And this was enough to kill anything he touched. He was an absolute menace. He killed 5 things over the course of 4 turns, which is insane. This guy was an absolute beast. He survived till the end of the game. This guy killed 2 defacers, 2 desecrators, and an Idlark in 4 turns, and that is a staggering amount of points and wounds for a thing that only costs 130 points. And yes, I was investing the triples to pull it off, but the triples are worth it. That pull is so strong, especially when your profile is like a 2-5-2-5 into a 3-5-2-4 in melee. And this guy's an absolute beast in combat, and then you still have that Rock Tusk Prowler who just ran up and started eating people with the Beast Speaker combos, and he took a little bit of damage. He was dropped down to like 5 wounds, but thanks to the Worthy Prey ability, he was doing his pouncing, doing 6 damage flat, then just eating the guy who pounced on. He was just a really strong piece on the battlefield. And yet, in the end, I only lost 1 model, and that model was the Heart Eater, and he died turn 2, as per usual. So he did score a bunch of points from him being dead. In the end, I scored 14 points to 4, so it was quite the domination. What I learned from this is that 1-box Untamed Beasts is kind of fun. Those Prey Takers are really fun. They only got 10 wounds. I don't like them at 10 wounds. I usually like to bless them to go to 14 wounds, so they're a little bit more durable. But running the 4-4-2-4 Sawblade variant, those guys are nasty, right? Because you have so many attacks going out, right? 4-4-2-4 is just a nice blendy profile. So you just go in and they just swing dice and they land a surprising chunk of damage going into other mid-range, going into chaff. These guys just mulch through things. And a similar thing happens with that Rock Tusk Prowler. That 4-4-2-5 profile is just nice and blendy going into chaff and going into mid-range. And the Jade Obelisk really couldn't do much about it. And of course, that first Fang, man, that first Fang is just very silly. He is such a strong control piece. He is such a good damage piece against this kind of mid-range warband, right? Going into Corvus Cabal, going into Skaven, going into the Jade Obelisk. He is such a powerful piece because he just kills the things he hooks. If you're in range of that harpoon, he can pull you into melee. This guy can delete most things. His damage is wonderfully high. This could be down to good rolling, but he's been so consistent in every single game, whether as a support piece to pull things in a Vexmore, or as a pure damage piece who's just getting into position and lobbing harpoons and just disrupting my opponent and killing things. In this last game, I even pulled somebody out of a quarter who was straddling 2 quarters and therefore wasn't actually counting for either because of the rules of Brutal Encounter. And that was just fantastic. Finding little ways to use the first Fang as a damaging and a support piece, even when I didn't have anything to pull him into, was just a lot of fun, and I've got a newfound respect for that first fan, because I did cut him from my first 2 lists last week in favour for like Spawn and True Bloods, but since putting him back into my lists, I don't think I could go a game with Untamed Beast without taking this first fang. He's an absolute beast and I love him dearly. Sadly, the Beast Speaker though has always been a little bit of a dud, so even running with that like double Spawn and True Blood or double Spawn Rock Tusk Prowler, which I've been dabbling with, like he just never really feels like he does enough, which is a bit of a shame. And I vastly prefer running a more of a yank and spank. So the Vexmo from Red Crusher list, despite it not performing all too well because of misplays, I do think is the current best incarnation, along with my Vexmo and Thoricon list, which is also very fun. It really boils down to, do I want to have an extra threat? So if I'm running the From Red Crusher list, I can't afford a Prey Taker. I have to take a Plains Runner, and if I do that, then I only have my Heart Eater, Vexmo, First Fang, and From Red Crusher as my main beaters. If I take a Thoricon instead of that From Red Crusher, I lose a bit of durability, I lose some damage, but I gain a Prey Taker with +4 wounds, and this gives me 5 pretty darn good smashers, even though I lack the raw power and durability of that From Red Crusher. So for next week, I'm going to dance between these two and just see what sticks, because these two have been the most successful lists I've ran, and I'm not quite sure which one I prefer to run just yet, after only playing each one once. But I guess that's it. That's the end of Road to Gold Episode 2. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the series. I'm not really sure where I'm going to go with this. It's just me rambling about some stuff I'm playing at the minute. I'm having fun just talking about things. I like rambling, so this is ideal for me to talk about random stuff I've been doing this week. If you like what you see, please leave a like and comment and subscribe. And until next time, lads, ladies, and everybody in between and beyond, ta-ra.
Groovy.
Hey all, and welcome to the post-toast credits. A massive shout out to my algorithmic demon slayers, Andy Morris, blah blah blah, the Head Knight of Paint, Heinz D, Long Run Hobbies, Lord Phylax, Maps, Sable Saber, Steph, Steve Bean, the Houston Toad, Tough Tootin' Baby, and Velas. A huge thank you for supporting the channel, and I will catch you all next time. Ta-ra!